Hey, we've got some good news and bad news. Tell me the good news first. Your book came back as a 9.8. Okay, what's the bad news? It's qualified. Oh my gosh. In today's comic book market, it's not uncommon for a savvy collector or investor to look at a CGC book, a book that's already been graded, and notice a slight flaw that might be corrected. So they'll crack out that book, send it to a comic book presser who will press the book and sometimes do some general cleaning. Then that book will be resubmitted back to CGC. Oftentimes, these books come back at a higher grade, and therefore that investor can make some money off of the book. But that's not always the case. Hear about the story of the nightmare resubmission. So the book is Startling Comics number 47. It was a 9.6 at Heritage Auctions. So what's so special about this book? Well, it's part of a run of Startling Comics starting from 47 to 53 that are all airbrushed by one of the most famous artists that there is of the Golden Age. That's Alex Schomburg. And in fact, 2 issues later is one of Schomburg's masterpieces. It's Startling Comics number 49 that has a robot cover. The robot cover is thought to be one of the top 10 covers of all the Golden Age. In 9.6, it's a $130,000 book. Startling 47 at a 9.6 is not as valuable, but it still can fetch 5 figures. This is a Golden Age book, so it's not easy to find, and in high grade, it's exceptionally tough. In fact, this 9.6 was tied with 2 others at the very top of the CGC census. And funny enough, Heritage had sold all 3. So it was the Mile High copy, a book from the Promise collection, and then this copy. I wanted this book pretty badly. I know the book well. I put a bid of close to $10,000 on it. I was relatively close, but the book went for over $13,000. Okay, that's not too unusual. I lose out on different books at auctions all the time. What surprised me, however, is what I found on Comic Link. This is another auction house. I type in Startling Comics to see if there are any other Startling Comics that have come up for auction. And then I see this book. It's Startling Comics number 47 again, and it looks familiar with a couple of big differences. Instead of being a 9.6, it's a 9.8. But notice the color of that label. It's no longer blue, it's green as qualified. And from memory, I thought, that seems like the same book that was from Heritage. So sure enough, I line them up, and that writing is a dead ringer that it's the same book, but I even looked for something else just to make sure that it was the same. There's a little dot on the right-hand side of the book that was the same that said, okay, 100% this is a match. So now I'm thinking about this from the perspective of the person who bought that 9.6, who won it at auction from Heritage for over $13,000. They must have looked at that book and said, hey, this looks pretty nice at a 9.6. In fact, I think it might be able to press up to a 9.8. Then I could imagine Heritage coming back and saying, hey, we've got some good news and bad news. Tell me the good news first. Your book came back as a 9.8. Okay, what's the bad news? It's qualified. Oh my gosh. Well, why is it qualified? It's missing a coupon on page 24. Oh, and by the way, I have a raw copy of this book. So let me show you what the coupon is. There are 24 interior pages, which means it is a coupon on the very last page, and it's this one. And there's a coupon right there. It's for a Dick Tracy wrist radio. So apparently somebody had cut this coupon from the book. So is it possible that that person got the 9.6, cracked it out, then cut out the coupon? I don't think there's any chance of that. I think what happened is that CGC, when they first graded the book and gave it the 9.6, that the reviewers simply missed that cutout coupon. So that begs the question to me, what do you do if you're the buyer there? And will CGC refund any money? My understanding is that when you crack open the case, that CGC no longer guarantees the grade. And at that point, they'll have these independent reviewers then again look at the book. So now they're looking at this resubbed book, and gosh, it looks beautiful. There's barely a flaw at all. Maybe the small flaw had been pressed out, and it ends up being a 9.8. But this time, what they found in their review was that coupon was missing. The big question that I'm asking, and you're likely asking too, is how is this new green label, the 9.8, going to affect price? Well, we're going to find out soon. In fact, the auction ends in 5 days. And in another segment within this same video, I'm going to revisit the price and see what it actually sells for. Right now, it's at $1,200. Again, this is 5 days before the auction ends. Humor me because I'm going to take a guess as to what the price actually goes for. Let me set this up for you. So at $1,200, this is how much a Startling 47 Blue Label 6.5 would go for. An 8.0 would sell for about $2,500 and a 9.0 would go for about $5,000. In fact, I recently bought a 9.0 back in the middle of 2022, and I spent $4,600 for it. So, it's about a $4,500, $5,000 book. Between a 9.0 and a 9.6, not many books have sold in the last decade, so I'm not going to include any of those there. So going back to the book in question, when it was a 9.6 Blue Label, it went for $12,600. Then finally, the highest price ever paid for a Startling 47 was back in 2021 for the Promise Collection copy of a 9.6, and that went for $14,400. So, given this scale, where do we think the book will fall? I'm going to start off on the very high end. So a 9.8, we've never seen that before. This is the first book that's ever hit that mark. And if it were a Blue Label, I think it would have a decent chance of getting the all-time high sales figure. So it could be higher than $14,400. In fact, it might be able to hit $20,000. In my opinion, though, I think the bonus that you get from a 9.8 is going to be more than offset in a negative way by the green label. I don't think there's any way that this book is going to be above $14,400. In fact, I don't think it's going to be able to hit its own price when it was Blue Label 9.6. So I think that $12,600, it's not going to hit that either. At this stage, I'm ruling out any real high dollars for this particular book. So now let me go way down. So we're going to go at the very bottom, a 6.5. Again, the book is currently sitting right there at $1,200. It's going to go higher than this, folks. For me, I have a 6.5, and I would gladly trade my 6.5 in for that qualified 9.8. And I think anybody else would too. Now, if we go up a level to an 8.0, I think most people would rather have a 9.8 green label than the 8.0. So I think somebody's going to bid higher than that 2,500. Now, as we go up to the 9.0, and this becomes very personal to me because I do have a 9.0, would I trade my Blue Label 9.0, which is a really good looking book, for that green label 9.8? That is a really tough one. I'm not sure. And if I'm saying I'm not sure, then to me, that means that's probably about the right price point, at least for me anyway. So here's what my guess is. I think that the most likely sort of zone for this book in terms of what it's going to sell for is in the $5,000 to $7,000 range. I'd be surprised if it falls much below $5,000 and really surprised if it sells for over $7,000. It's about 1 day before the auction ends, and the book is only sitting at $1,500. And I thought it's just begging for another bid. Thought about it for a couple minutes and submitted a bid of $3,500, which I thought would be a great deal. Immediately, Comic Link tells me that I've been outbid and the book sits at $3,600. Today is the day that the auction closes. I wake up in the morning, I look, and the book is still sitting at $3,600. I'm not that surprised because sometimes it's at the very end of the auction when a lot of action happens. The last half an hour, sometimes even the last few seconds. So I'm going to fast forward and we're going to look at the very last minute of this auction. 1 minute left, still $3,600. Let's fast forward to the last 15 seconds. This is where the fireworks often happen. Five seconds, nothing. Oh my Lord, this book stopped at $3,600. This book sold just a few months ago for $12,600. That's a $9,000 loss in the span of just a few months. So this is a really tough situation, and I'm going to be looking at it from the perspective of 5 different people and or entities. So the first person I'm going to look at or think about is that person who submitted the raw book to CGC for the first time. The question that I have is, did that person know that the coupon was missing on the last page? If they did and didn't disclose this to CGC, so they got the blue label and knew it should have been green, then I think they should be partially responsible for all this. Second, let me turn to the person who bought the book from Comic Link, the person who got it for $3,600. To you, I say, congratulations. You got a great deal on that book. From my perspective, I think it's worth $5,000 or $6,000. If you keep it in your personal collection, you should be proud of it. It is likely the best looking copy of Startling 47 that there is. Next, I'm going to turn to the person who I think got the worst deal of everybody involved. And this is the person who bought the book from Heritage for $12,600. And I'm assuming they're the same people who sold the book at a loss of $9,000. I just shake my head. I mean, you cracked the book out and you resubmitted. Now, you know the risk of cracking out a book, and you might be thinking, well, I think it's got a chance to get an upgrade here from a 9.6 to a 9.8, but I'll accept the risk of it being downgraded by this independent graders to maybe a 9.4. That's something that we all contend with books. What you're not factoring into the equation is that the book is going to come back with a different label, in this case, green, and it would appear that CGC failed to see that missing coupon when it was graded 9.6. That stinks, and I hope you have better success in the future, and perhaps you and CGC can work out something. Next, let me turn my gaze to CGC. Anybody who's watched this channel knows I'm a huge CGC fan, and if a rep from CGC watches this video, I want to let you know that I'm not trying to go out of my way to flame you. Nevertheless, this is a pretty tough situation, and I feel really bad for the person who bought that book, overpaid for that book back a few months ago from Heritage. My guess is the way that your agreements are set up, that you bear no legal responsibility for this book going from blue to green. From an ethical perspective, though, I wonder about the responsibility here. I mean, this kind of error, I think, goes above and beyond what most people would expect. I could sort of see how it might happen, though. It's this sort of rare book that comes across. You all don't deal with it very much. It looks amazing, and you're like, hey, this is a 9.6. They open the graders open up the book, white pages. I mean, it's gorgeous. So they flip through 24 pages. It's all there, and they're really not on the lookout for a missing coupon. So I could see how it happens. But it's multiple graders looking at this, and this is what CGC is supposed to do. You all are supposed to look at books closer than anybody else so that we can feel confident in your grade. So even though there's no, I'm guessing, legal responsibility here, it would be pretty cool if you could somehow do right by the buyer. For me personally, I dodged a bullet when my bid wasn't high enough at the Heritage auctions. I've been in the game a long time, though, and I made many big bids in my day. In fact, I made bids that were this close to winning on huge books like Action Comics #1. Had I won them, I would have had to sell my entire collection for one book. If you want to find out more about these huge bids, check out this video. And if you've enjoyed this content that digs a little bit deeper than your typical comic book video, please consider subscribing. Thanks so much for hanging out with me, and hope to see you around real soon.